They said Isaac Harlan was just another quiet black farmer. Slow, polite, harmless. The sheriff sure believed it. He saw an old limp, a bowed head, and thought he could do what he always did: humiliate, threaten, and walk away laughing. But what the sheriff didn't know was that Isaac once carried a rifle that changed the course of the war, that this quiet man was Eagle Eye Harlan, the Union's deadliest sniper, the ghost Confederate soldiers whispered about before they died. When the sheriff dragged him through town and promised to hang him, Isaac didn't beg. He waited, because a man who's buried hundreds never forgets how to dig graves. The sheriff thought he owned the law. He was about to learn. Isaac Harlan was the law he feared most. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. In the heat of a Mississippi morning, Isaac Harlan repairs the broken fence around his small, sharecropped land. His limp drags slightly in the dust as his young nephew Elijah Harlan hands him nails. Across the field, distant laughter from white townsfolk reminds them of the world they live in, one that barely tolerates their survival. "Hold that post steady now," Isaac says, his voice low and even. His weathered hands work with practiced care, measuring twice before hammering the nail home with one clean strike. Elijah shifts his weight, impatient. "Why we always fixing this fence? They just gonna break it again." The boy's eyes dart toward the road where 3 white men on horseback had trampled through their fence 2 nights before, whooping and hollering as they tore down a section for sport. Isaac continues his work without looking up. "Because it's ours to fix," he says simply, reaching for another nail. The sun beats down mercilessly. Sweat beads on Isaac's forehead as he straightens a warped board. His bad leg throbs with the memory of a Minier ball that tore through muscle and bone 6 years earlier. Some days are worse than others. Today the pain gnaws deep, but Isaac's face reveals nothing. Elijah hands him the last nail, watching his uncle with quiet admiration. "You think Miss Green will really open that school next month?" Isaac pauses, looking toward the distant church where Martha Green had been working for weeks. "If anyone can do it, she will." As if summoned by their words, Martha appears walking along the dusty road that passes Isaac's small plot. She carries a basket and walks with purpose, her posture straight despite the heat. "Mr. Harlan," she calls, approaching the fence line. "Elijah." Isaac removes his hat and nods respectfully. "Miss Green." Martha's gaze takes in the repaired fence. "3rd time this month," she observes. Not a question. "4th," Elijah corrects. Martha offers the basket. "I brought some cornbread. And some primer books, if you're still interested, Elijah." The boy's face brightens as he reaches for the books. Isaac watches the exchange with quiet approval. Martha Green had come from Philadelphia with determination to teach freedmen to read, despite threats and hostility from Pine Hollow's white residents. "How's the school coming along?" Isaac asks, accepting the basket with calloused hands. Martha's eyes hold both weariness and resolve. "Windows are in now. Just need benches and tables." She lowers her voice. "Sheriff Carter came by yesterday. Said he'd need to inspect all materials before we open. Called it precaution against seditious materials." Isaac nods, understanding the unspoken. The sheriff's inspections were never just inspections. "I can help with those benches," Isaac offers. "Got some good pine cut and drying in the shed." Martha smiles briefly. "That would be most welcome, Mr. Harlan." She glances toward town. "Will you be heading in today?" "Need flour and salt," Isaac confirms. And Elijah hears outgrowing his boots. "Be careful," Martha says, her voice dropping. "The sheriff's in a mood." 2 freedmen were arrested this morning for being on the street after sundown. Isaac's face remains impassive, but his jaw tightens slightly. Appreciate the warning. After Martha continues on her way, Isaac and Elijah finish the fence repairs in silence. The distant laughter from town grows louder as more white folks gather for what sounds like some celebration. "What's happening in town today?" Elijah asks, wiping dust from his hands. "Founders' Day," Isaac replies, marking when the town was established. What he doesn't say is how the founding families had built their wealth on the backs of slaves, people like his parents and grandparents. They set out toward town an hour later, Isaac walking with his measured gait, compensating for the limp without complaint. Elijah carries their empty sack for purchases, occasionally kicking at stones in the road. "Uncle Isaac," the boy says suddenly, "you ever miss being a soldier?" Isaac's stride falters almost imperceptibly. "No," he answers after a moment. War isn't something to miss. They're halfway to town when the sound of horses approaches from behind. Isaac gently guides Elijah to the side of the road, his hand briefly touching the boy's shoulder in warning to stay quiet. Sheriff Beauregard Carter rides up with deputies Clyde Walker and Roy Denton flanking him. All three men wear badges that shine in the sunlight, polished to gleaming. Carter's Confederate ring catches the light as he reins his horse to a stop. "Well now, look what we got here," Carter drawls, his voice carrying artificial pleasantness. "Harlan and the boy out for a stroll." Isaac keeps his eyes lowered, hat in hand. "Morning, Sheriff." Carter stares down, waiting. His smile hardens at the edges. Walker spits tobacco juice that lands inches from Isaac's boot. "Sheriff asked you a question, boy." Isaac hadn't heard a question, but he knows what they want. "Morning, Sheriff Carter, sir," he amends, the words bitter on his tongue. Too late. Carter dismounts, his boots sending up small clouds of dust. He stands toe-to-toe with Isaac, who remains perfectly still. "You deaf as well as crippled?" Carter asks, his breath hot and sour with whiskey despite the early hour. "No, sir," Isaac replies evenly. The slap comes fast and hard, Carter's ring catching Isaac's lip and splitting it. Blood wells immediately. "That's for disrespect," Carter says loudly enough for the gathering townspeople to hear. "Next time you don't answer when I speak, it'll be worse." Isaac tastes copper but doesn't move to wipe the blood away. He simply stands, eyes now fixed on a point past Carter's shoulder, his expression revealing nothing of the calculation happening behind his eyes. Elijah trembles beside him, fury and fear warring in the boy's face. Carter studies Isaac's calm demeanor, something like confusion crossing his features before hardening into deeper anger. "One wrong look, boy, and I'll hang you from your own gate." When Isaac still doesn't flinch, Carter turns away, mounting his horse with a grunt. "Move along now. And remember, no freedmen on the streets after sundown during Founders Week." The three men ride toward town, leaving Isaac and Elijah in a cloud of dust. The townspeople who had paused to watch the confrontation slowly disperse, some looking uncomfortable, others laughing. That night, Isaac sits by lamplight, wiping blood from his lip as Elijah asks why he didn't fight back. Isaac replies softly, "Some wars ain't fought out loud." The camera pans to a small, tarnished Union sharpshooter's medal tucked in a drawer beside his bed. The following Sunday evening, hymn songs drift through the pine trees from the small wooden church near Isaac's land. Elijah sits beside Isaac as Martha teaches scripture to the freedmen gathered inside. The church, little more than a rough-hewn wooden structure with simple benches, glows with lamplight that spills from its windows into the deepening dusk. "And the truth shall make you free," Martha reads from John 8:32, her voice carrying clear and steady through the warm air. Isaac sits in the back row, his bad leg stretched slightly into the aisle. He keeps his eyes on the door, a habit he hasn't lost since the war. Gatherings like this made him uneasy. Too many freedmen in one place always seemed to draw trouble, like flies to honey. Elijah leans forward, captivated by Martha's words. Around them, 30 or so freedmen and their families listen with reverent attention. Some nod, others whisper, quiet, amens. For a moment, the church feels like a sanctuary, a place where they can breathe without looking over their shoulders. Martha continues, "This passage reminds us that knowledge is power. That's why we learn to read, to know the truth in these pages, and in the world." Isaac notices Thomas Washington, an elderly man who'd been teaching himself to read, proudly following along in his own Bible. Next to him, two young boys practice writing letters on scraps of paper. This is what Carter fears, Isaac thinks. Not rebellion with guns, but rebellion of the mind. "Brother James, would you lead us in Amazing Grace?" Martha asks. James Johnson stands, his deep voice starting the familiar hymn. Others join in, the sound swelling until it fills the small church, with something powerful and defiant in its beauty. Isaac doesn't sing. He watches, listens, and feels the hairs on his neck stand up just as the first verse ends. He hears them before anyone else does, horses approaching fast. "Miss Green," Isaac says quietly, but with enough urgency that Martha stops mid-word and turns. The door bursts open. Sheriff Carter stands framed in the doorway, deputies Walker and Denton flanking him. Four other white men Isaac recognizes from town crowd behind them. "Well, ain't this touching?" Carter says, removing his hat with mock politeness. A little nighttime gathering. His eyes scan the room, counting faces, noting names. The singing dies instantly. Children press against their parents. Elijah shifts closer to Isaac, who places a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. "Evening, Sheriff," Martha says, closing her Bible carefully. "We're just concluding our Sunday service." Carter steps inside, boots heavy on the wooden floor. Mighty late for a service, don't you think? And mighty suspicious. All you folks gathering after dark. He picks up a primer book from a bench. "What's this? Teaching reading again, Miss Green? After our conversation about appropriate materials?" "The Bible requires reading, Sheriff," Martha replies evenly. "There's nothing improper about literacy." Carter laughs, a harsh sound without humor. "Unless it puts ideas in people's heads." He turns to address the room. "Like, maybe ideas about voting, or owning more land, or—" His voice hardens, "getting even with your betters." Deputy Denton knocks over a bench with his boot. The crash makes everyone jump. "Seems to me," Carter continues, stalking down the aisle, "this looks like an unlawful assembly. Maybe even—" He pauses for effect. "Plotting rebellion." Several people murmur protests. Isaac remains silent, watching Carter's every move. "Sheriff," Martha tries again, "these are God-fearing people who—" "Shut your northern mouth, woman," Carter snaps. "Y'all think Lincoln's ghost's gonna save you?" He kicks another bench over. "That paper freedom means something out here in the real world?" The deputies take this as permission. They begin overturning benches, scattering books and papers. One of them shoves James Johnson when he stands to protest. Another grabs Thomas Washington's Bible and tears pages from it. Martha steps forward. "Stop this! This is a house of worship!" Deputy Walker pushes her roughly. "House of trouble, more like." Isaac moves before thinking, rising to his feet and stepping between Martha and the deputy. Elijah follows, standing beside his uncle with clenched fists. Carter's attention snaps to Isaac. His eyes narrow, recognizing the challenge. With deliberate slowness, he walks toward Isaac until they're face to face. "Problem, Harlan?" Carter asks, voice dangerously soft. "No problem," Isaac replies steadily. "Just keeping the peace." Carter's hand moves to his pistol. In one swift motion, he draws it and presses the cold barrel against Isaac's temple. The church falls completely silent. "Next time you open your mouth, I'll kill you," Carter hisses, loud enough for everyone to hear. "That's a promise, not a threat." Isaac says nothing, but his eyes, dark, steady, unblinking, lock onto Carter's with such intensity that the sheriff's confidence wavers visibly. It's not fear in Isaac's gaze, but something else. a calculating patience, like a predator waiting for the right moment. For 3 heartbeats, they stand frozen in this tableau. Then Carter steps back, unsettled. "Clear this place out," he orders his men. Anyone still here in 5 minutes gets arrested. People begin gathering their belongings, helping those who've been shoved or struck. An older woman clutches her bleeding hand where a deputy's boot had stepped on it. A young boy cries quietly against his mother's skirt. "This ain't over," Carter says to Martha as he backs toward the door. School opening's been postponed indefinitely. By order of the law. He taps his badge. The men leave as abruptly as they came, horses' hooves fading into the night. Thunder rolls in the distance, promising rain. Elijah immediately helps Martha gather the scattered books. "We can fix this," he insists, his young voice tight with anger and determination. Martha touches his shoulder gently. "Yes, we can," she agrees, though her hands tremble slightly. Around them, the congregation helps those who are injured. Thomas Washington carefully collects the torn pages of his Bible, smoothing each one with reverence. Isaac stays where he is, staring at the simple wooden cross above the pulpit. The barrel's imprint still burns cold against his skin. Outside, thunder rolls again, closer now. Lightning briefly illuminates the church through the windows. "Some things," Isaac mutters, his voice barely audible, "you can't turn the other cheek to forever." The next afternoon, Isaac works his small field, the hoe rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Sweat darkens his shirt, despite the late hour. The sun hangs low, painting the sky amber and gold, casting long shadows across his 3 acres, barely enough to feed himself and Elijah. But it was his own land, bought with saved army pay. Elijah moves along the row behind him, pulling weeds and tossing them into a bucket. The boy's energy had dimmed since last night's confrontation at the church. Martha had closed the school today, telling the children to stay home until things calmed down. "You think Miss Martha will open the school again soon?" Elijah asks, breaking the silence between them. "She's a stubborn woman," Isaac replies. "Good kind of stubborn. Like you?" The boy's face hints at a smile. Isaac's reply is cut short by the distant rumble of wheels and hoofbeat. He straightens, leaning on his hoe, watching the road. A wagon approaches, kicking up dust that turns copper in the setting sun. Behind it ride several men on horseback. "Go to the house," Isaac tells Elijah quietly. "But, now, boy." Elijah hesitates, then drops his bucket and hurries toward their small cabin. Isaac remains where he is, watching the approaching wagon. Sheriff Carter sits at the reins, Deputy Walker beside him. 4 other men follow on horseback, local troublemakers who'd fought for the Confederacy. The last rider carries something looped over his saddle horn, a rope already fashioned into a noose. Isaac sets his jaw, plants his feet. Nearby, 2 freedmen working their own plots look up with alarm. One immediately backs away, heading for his cabin. The other, James Johnson from the church, sets down his tools and moves closer to Isaac, a silent show of support. The wagon stops 20 yards away. Carter jumps down, adjusting his gun belt with deliberate showmanship. "Afternoon, Harlan," he calls, voice carrying across the field. "Got business with you." Isaac says nothing, just waits as the men approach. The silence makes Carter's smile falter. "You're under arrest," Carter announces loudly, "for insulting an officer of the law and inciting disorder at the church last night." "That's a lie," James says before Isaac can respond. "He did no such thing." Carter's head snaps toward James. "You calling me a liar, boy?" Deputy Walker dismounts and strides toward James, rifle raised. James stands his ground until Walker slams the rifle butt into his stomach. James doubles over with a grunt of pain. "Anyone else want to speak for the prisoner?" Carter asks, looking around at the few freedmen who've gathered at a distance. No one speaks. Walker shoves James to his knees. Isaac finally breaks his silence. "I'll come peacefully. Leave these folks be." "Oh, you'll come all right," Carter says. "Boys, secure the prisoner." Two men grab Isaac's arms. He doesn't resist as they twist them behind his back and bind his wrists with rope. "Uncle Isaac!" Elijah's voice cuts through the commotion. The boy runs from the cabin, ignoring Isaac's earlier command. "Elijah, stay back!" Isaac shouts. Too late. Elijah charges toward the men holding his uncle. Deputy Walker intercepts him, catching him with a backhand that sends the boy sprawling in the dirt. "Leave him!" Isaac struggles now, fury breaking through his calm. "He's just a child," Carter laughs. "Just teaching the boy some manners, like I'm about to teach you." He nods to his men. "Get him in the wagon." As they drag Isaac forward, a stranger's voice interrupts. "What's the charge here, Sheriff?" Everyone turns. A white man in his 50s stands at the edge of the field, leaning on a walking stick. His left sleeve is pinned up where an arm should be. Road dust covers his worn but decent clothes, marking him as a traveler. "None of your business, stranger," Carter replies. "Just keeping the peace." "Looks more like disturbing it," the man says, limping closer. His accent marks him as northern. Carter's hand drops to his pistol. "You passing through or looking for trouble?" "Just passing through," the man says. "Name's Thomas Ward. Served with the 5th Wisconsin." He gestures to his missing arm. "Antietam took this. War's over, though. No need for rough justice now." The men drag Isaac past Ward, bumping him roughly. The impact jostles something from Isaac's shirt pocket, a small metal object that falls to the ground at Ward's feet. Ward bends awkwardly to retrieve it. As he straightens, examining what he's found, his face transforms with recognition. "This is a Union sharpshooter's medal," Ward says, voice hushed. He looks at Isaac with widening eyes. You're Eagle Eye Harlan, from the 102nd U.S. Colored Troops." The name hangs in the air like gun smoke. Isaac's expression doesn't change, but his shoulders tighten almost imperceptibly. Carter snorts with disbelief. "This broken-down sharecropper?" "Eagle what?" Ward turns to Carter. "Eagle Eye Harlan. Best shot in the Union Army. 200 confirmed kills, including half a dozen Confederate officers at Petersburg." He stares at Isaac with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. "They said you could hit a man at 1,000 yards. Said you were a ghost in the trees." Carter looks between Ward and Isaac, searching for the joke. Finding none, he laughs anyway. A forced, uncomfortable sound. "Well, whoever he was, he's my prisoner now," Carter says, snatching the medal from Ward. He tosses it into the dirt and grinds it under his heel. "And tomorrow at dawn, he's a dead man." "On what charges?" Ward demands. "Inciting insurrection," Carter invents, "and insulting an officer of the law. That's enough in my county." The men push Isaac into the wagon. From the ground, Elijah watches helplessly, blood trickling from his split lip. "The war's over, Sheriff," Ward calls. "This isn't justice." "War ain't over for some of us," Carter replies, climbing onto the wagon. "And justice is whatever I say it is." The wagon pulls away, the riders following behind. Isaac sits straight-backed, despite his bonds, his face a mask of calm. He looks once at Elijah, a silent message passing between them. Inside the jailhouse, Carter personally shoves Isaac into a small cell. The sheriff is more agitated now, his earlier confidence shaken by Ward's words. "So you were some big hero, huh?" Carter taunts, watching Isaac closely. "Some ghost in the trees?" He leans against the bars. "Well, ghosts don't bleed, and tomorrow we'll prove that." Isaac sits on the thin pallet in the corner. His voice, when he finally speaks, is quiet. "You afraid of ghosts, Sheriff?" Carter's face darkens. "I'm afraid of nothing, especially not some uppity." He stops himself, takes a breath. "You get one night to think about your sins. At dawn, you hang for thinking you're a man." The cell door slams shut. Carter's boots fade down the hallway. As darkness falls, Rain begins to patter against the small window high in the cell wall. Isaac closes his eyes and begins to hum softly, an old Union marching tune that speaks of glory and freedom. Hours later, a whisper comes from the window. "Harlan?" Isaac opens his eyes to see Thomas Ward peering through the bars. "You saved my unit at Cold Harbor," Ward whispers urgently. "That Confederate artillery would have destroyed us if you hadn't taken out their spotters." Isaac moves to the window. "And no one was saved here," he replies softly. Ward's face is grim but determined in the faint light. "I'm heading to Jackson tonight. There's a Freedmen's Bureau office there. I'll bring help." Isaac nods once. As Ward disappears into the rainy night, Isaac returns to his pallet and resumes his quiet humming, each note deliberate and steady as a heartbeat. Midnight settles over Pine Hollow like a heavy cloak. Lightning fractures the sky, casting brief, ghostly illuminations across the muddy streets. Rain hammers against rooftops and windows, drumming a nervous rhythm that matches the urgency in Thomas Ward's heart as he urges his borrowed horse forward, heading for the telegraph office at the edge of town. Inside the jailhouse, Isaac Harlan sits perfectly still on his thin pallet. His ears track the sound of boots pacing across the wooden floor above. Deputy Walker, pulling night duty, walking back and forth, occasionally stopping to spit tobacco juice into a can. The building creaks and groans under the assault of wind and rain. Isaac closes his eyes, mentally counting the deputy's footsteps. 15 paces east. Pause. Spit. 15 paces west. Regular as a clock. He commits the pattern to memory. Miles away, Ward pushes his horse harder, the animal's flanks heaving with exertion. The rain has turned the road to mud, making progress slower than he'd hoped. Still, determination drives him forward. Justice matters. Truth matters. The war had to mean something. Back in town, Sheriff Carter sits in his office above the jail cells, a bottle of whiskey open on his desk. Deputy Clyde Walker stands before him, hat in hand. "You sure about this, Sheriff?" Walker asks nervously. "That Union man seemed set on reaching Jackson." Carter drains his glass. "Let him try." He slams the glass down. "But first, let's pay a visit to our fine veteran friend." Carter rises, buckling on his gun belt. His eyes are bloodshot, his movements loose with whiskey, but his voice is steady. "Get the horses ready. And bring Roy and the Simmons brothers. Tell them there's $20 in it." Walker nods and hurries out into the rain. Carter pauses at the small window in his floor that looks down into Isaac's cell. Isaac sits unmoved, eyes forward, shoulders straight, despite his chains. "Sitting there like a statue," Carter mutters. "We'll see how proud you look when they put that rope around your neck." The sound of horses draws Carter's attention. Walker has been efficient. 4 men wait in the rain, mounted and ready. Carter grabs his slicker and hat, thunders down the stairs, and passes Isaac's cell without a glance. "Hold down the fort, Peterson," he calls to the night jailer. "I've got vermin to catch." Thomas Ward has made it 3 miles toward Jackson when he hears horses behind him. He turns in his saddle, squinting through the rain. Lightning reveals mounted figures cresting the hill behind him. "Damn!" he whispers, digging his heels into his horse's sides. But his tired mount can't outrun the fresh horses behind him. The riders gain quickly. Ward sees a dense stand of trees ahead and makes a decision. He turns his horse sharply off the road, hoping to lose his pursuers in the woods. A crack of thunder masks the first gunshot. The second shot finds its mark. Ward feels the impact between his shoulder blades, a shocking punch that steals his breath. He topples from the saddle, hitting the muddy ground hard. Carter dismounts, walking toward the fallen man. Ward tries to crawl forward, fingers digging into the mud. "Union man," Carter says, standing over him, "always sticking your nose where it don't belong." Ward rolls onto his back, rain washing over his face. "The Bureau." "We'll come looking." Carter smiles. For what? A drifter? A troublemaker who got into a fight with my prisoner? He crouches down. That's the story folks will hear. How the killer Isaac Harlan confessed to you, then broke your neck when you threatened to tell? Ward's eyes widen with understanding. No one will believe. Everyone will believe, Carter replies, drawing his pistol. Because in this county, truth is whatever I say it is. The final gunshot is swallowed by another roll of thunder. As dawn breaks, the rain clears. News spreads through Pine Hollow like wildfire. Isaac Harlan, charged with the murder of Thomas Ward. The hanging scheduled for 3 days hence. By mid-morning, Martha Green stands outside the jailhouse, her dress damp at the hem from the muddy streets. Beside her, Elijah shifts anxiously from foot to foot, his split lip still swollen from yesterday's blow. We need to see him, Martha tells the deputy at the door. Her voice is firm despite her fear. The deputy sneers but goes inside. Moments later, he returns with Sheriff Carter, who smiles broadly at the sight of them. Miss Green, he says, tipping his hat with mock politeness. And the boy. Come to say goodbye to your murderous friend? We know Isaac didn't kill anyone, Martha says steadily. Carter shrugs. Evidence says different, but I'm feeling generous today. He opens the door. 10 minutes. I want him to see what he's leaving behind. The deputy leads them down a narrow hallway to Isaac's cell. Isaac rises when he sees them, his chains rattling. His face shows no surprise, just quiet relief at their safety. Uncle Isaac! Elijah rushes to the bars. Easy, boy, Isaac says gently. I'm all right. Martha steps closer. Isaac, they're saying terrible things about you and that Union veteran. Ward, Isaac says softly. Good man. They killed him, didn't they? Martha whispers. The sheriff and his men. Isaac's eyes meet hers. Truth has a way of finding light. Not in this town. Carter interrupts, suddenly behind them. Not for your kind. He saunters forward, enjoying their discomfort. You people forget your place too easily, acting like you got rights. He leans close to the bars, voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You only breathe, 'cause I let you. Martha stiffens, but holds her ground. God lets us breathe, Sheriff, and he sees everything. Carter laughs. God abandoned this place long ago, woman. He turns to the deputy. Time's up. Get them out. Elijah, Isaac calls as they're led away. Be strong for me. The boy nods, fighting tears. Martha's hand rests protectively on his shoulder as they leave. Alone again, Isaac returns to his pallet. The cell is quiet, save for the steady drip of rainwater leaking through the ceiling. He sits motionless for a long time, listening to the sounds of the jailhouse. Boots on floorboards, keys jangling, occasional laughter. As the afternoon light angles through his small window, Isaac notices something. A floorboard with a nail working loose from the damp. He shifts position, making sure no one is watching through the door grate, then works his fingers around the nail head. It moves slightly. That night, after the jailer makes his final rounds, Isaac slides from his pallet and kneels by the loose board. Working slowly, methodically, he uses the nail to begin scraping at the chain pin connecting his shackles to the wall ring. The metal is soft, poorly made. Each scrape makes the tiniest sound, masked by the normal settling of the building. Hours pass. His fingers bleed, but he continues, pausing only when footsteps pass his door. Outside his window, the clouds have cleared. Stars appear one by one in the night sky. Isaac works until his arms ache, then carefully replaces the nail in the floorboard and returns to his pallet. As dawn approaches, he moves to the window, watching light slowly spread across the eastern sky. The gallows frame stands half-built in the town square, visible from his vantage point. They think they buried a soldier, Isaac murmurs, but he's still in the fight. 2 days later, the afternoon sun filters through the cracked windows of Martha Green's schoolhouse. The small wooden structure stands quiet, empty of children who've been kept away by frightened parents. Inside, Martha paces between the crude benches, while Elijah watches anxiously from his perch by the window. "You'll need to travel only at night," Martha says, her voice low despite being alone. "Follow the creek bed south until you reach the crossroads at Miller's farm. The Bureau outpost is 5 miles east from there." Elijah nods, his young face serious beyond his 14 years. "I know the way. Uncle Silas used to take me fishing down that creek." Martha stops pacing and kneels before him, smoothing his collar with trembling fingers. "Silas Boone is our only hope. He has connections with the Bureau, and as a white man, they'll listen to him." "What if the sheriff's men catch me?" Elijah asks, voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. Martha's expression hardens. "That's why I'm creating a distraction. I've drafted a petition demanding a proper trial for Isaac. Tomorrow morning, I'll gather the women from the settlement to present it." She manages a small smile. "Carter's men will be watching us closely, not the woods behind the settlement." The boy stands straighter. "I won't let you down. I won't let Uncle Isaac down." Martha reaches into her dress pocket and removes a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth. "Food for the journey. And this," she presses something metal into his palm. "Isaac's medal. Show it to Boone. Make him understand who Isaac really is." Elijah tucks both items into his shirt. "I'll leave as soon as it's dark." Martha nods and looks out the window at the gallows being completed in the town square. One more day until the hanging. They have no time to waste. As dusk falls, Martha walks openly through the settlement, speaking to the freed women about tomorrow's petition. Carter's men watch from horseback at the edge of the road, smirking at what they see as a futile gesture, their attention fixed on Martha. None notice the small figure slipping into the cypress swamp behind the last row of cabins. Elijah moves like a shadow through the trees, each step placed with care to avoid breaking branches. The metal presses against his chest, a constant reminder of his mission. The moon rises, casting silver light through the cypress branches and turning the swamp water to mirrors between the trees. He follows the creek south as Martha instructed, staying low and pausing often to listen. An hour into his journey, he hears horses, not on the road, but crashing through the underbrush nearby. "Check the creek bed," a voice calls out. "The boy couldn't have gone far." Elijah's heart pounds. They know. Someone must have seen him leave. He darts behind a massive cypress, pressing his back against the rough bark. The horses draw closer, splashing through the shallow creek. Light flickers between the trees. Lanterns. "Sheriff wants him alive," another voice shouts. "Said the boy knows where the slave hid his rifle." Elijah bites his lip, fighting panic. There is no rifle. Uncle Isaac hasn't touched a gun since the war. It's just another of Carter's lies to justify the hunt. The riders draw closer. Elijah crouches lower, ready to run, when distant hoofbeats approach from the south. Many horses, moving fast and with purpose. "Riders coming," one of Carter's men calls. "Bureau patrol," another yells. "Scatter." The woods erupt with confusion as Carter's men wheel their horses around. Moments later, a line of uniformed men on horseback appears, rifles ready. At their head rides a weathered man with a graying beard and a permanent scowl. Silas Boone. "This is federal territory," Boone shouts. "State your business." Carter's men hesitate, then retreat without answering. They know Boone's reputation, a Union veteran with no love for former Confederates and the authority to arrest them. When they've gone, Elijah steps from his hiding place. "Mr. Boone, Mr. Boone, it's me, Elijah Harlan." Boone turns sharply, dismounting with a grimace from his bad leg. "Elijah, what in God's name are you doing out here alone?" "My uncle," Elijah gasps, the words tumbling out. "They're going to hang him tomorrow for something he didn't do." Boone's face darkens. "Isaac? I heard rumors, but He needs your help, Elijah interrupts, pulling the medal from his shirt. They don't know who he is, who he was. The moonlight catches on the tarnished medal in Elijah's palm. Boone takes it, squinting in the dim light. His face changes as recognition dawns. This is a sharpshooter's medal, he says slowly. Union Army. Uncle Isaac was a soldier, Elijah explains. They called him Eagle Eye Harlan. Boone finishes, his voice suddenly hushed. He stares at Elijah with new intensity. Your uncle is Eagle Eye Harlan? The sniper from the 102nd. Elijah nods, not fully understanding Boone's reaction. Please, sir. They're going to kill him. Boone is quiet for a long moment, lost in memory. When he speaks, his voice has changed. I was at Spotsylvania. Our company was pinned down by Confederate fire. We were being picked off, one by one. He touches the medal again. Then it started. Confederate officers falling every few minutes. Perfect shots from impossible distance. He looks at Elijah, his eyes haunted. They said one man saved 50 lives that day. He pockets the medal and mounts his horse, extending a hand down to Elijah. We ride for Pine Hollow. Now. By midnight, they've returned to the edge of town. Boone's men establish a hidden camp in the woods, while Boone and Elijah creep closer to survey the jailhouse. Guards patrol outside, more than usual. Carter knows we're coming. Boone mutters. Someone must have warned him. Can we still save Uncle Isaac? Elijah whispers. Boone's expression is grim. We need someone inside. He studies the jail thoughtfully. Those young deputies, any of them seem uncertain about all this? Elijah thinks, then nods. Deputy Doyle. Henry Doyle. He doesn't talk much, but he gave me water when the others wouldn't. Inside the jail, that same young deputy stands outside Isaac's cell. Henry Doyle, barely 20, shifts nervously from foot to foot before glancing over his shoulder and approaching the bars. Mr. Harlan, he says quietly, everyone's asleep. I wanted to speak with you. Isaac sits up on his pallet, studying the young man's face. Speak, then. Henry swallows hard. My father was at Cold Harbor, under Captain James Whitley. Isaac's expression doesn't change, but recognition flickers in his eyes. Whitley fell to a Union shot. Your shot, Henry says, not a question, but a statement. Father saw you through his field glass, said you had him in your sights too, but you lowered your rifle and disappeared into the trees. Isaac is silent for a long moment. A man makes choices, he finally says. Your father had laid down his weapon to help the wounded. I don't shoot unarmed men. Henry nods, blinking rapidly. That's why I'm here now. Because you spared him. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a bundle. Bread. Water. His voice drops lower. And this. A small piece of bent wire glints in the dim light. For the lock, Henry whispers. I'll be on watch before dawn. The back door will be unbolted. Isaac accepts the items, his movements careful, measured. Why risk yourself for me? Henry looks away. Because my father came home. Because I've watched Carter hang 3 innocent men since I took this badge. His young face hardens. Because someone has to remember what's right. The deputy slips away, leaving Isaac alone in the darkness. Isaac tucks the bread and wire beneath his pallet, then returns to the loose floorboard where he's been working. All night, his fingers move methodically, scraping metal against metal, working at the shackle pin. Hours pass in silence, broken only by the occasional call of the night guards outside. Isaac works without rest, driven by the knowledge that dawn will bring the hangman. As the first gray light of morning seeps through his window, Isaac feels the pin give way. With careful pressure, it slides free. The heavy iron manacle falls from his ankle with a muffled thud against the dirt floor. Isaac freezes, listening for any reaction from the guards. Hearing nothing, he quickly gathers the broken chain and shackle and hides them beneath his thin blanket. He sits back on his pallet, arranging himself to appear still bound, and waits. Outside, birds begin their morning songs. The gallows stands ready in the square, visible through his small window. Isaac's face reveals nothing, not fear, not hope, only calm determination as he closes his eyes and listens to the approaching footsteps of the morning guard. Fog hangs low over Pine Hollow, shrouding the town in milky silence. The jail stands dark, except for a single lantern burning in the sheriff's office. Two deputies doze on chairs outside, rifles balanced against their legs. Henry Doyle paces nervously at the rear of the building, checking his pocket watch every few minutes. The night is unusually quiet, too quiet. Henry takes a deep breath, steels himself, and moves toward the livery stable across from the jail. His hands shake as he pulls a small tin of kerosene from his coat and splashes it across the hay bales stacked against the barn wall. "God forgive me," he whispers, striking a match. The flame catches instantly, racing up the dry hay. Henry steps back, watching as orange light blooms in the darkness. He waits until the fire roars loud enough to be heard, then runs toward the jail. "Fire!" he shouts. "Fire at the livery!" The sleeping deputies jerk awake. One knocks over his chair in his hurry to stand. "The horses!" he yells. "Get the sheriff!" They rush out, joined by townsfolk emerging from nearby buildings. No one notices Henry slip through the back door of the jail, keys in hand. Inside, Isaac sits waiting in the darkness. When Henry appears, he stands slowly. "It's time," Henry whispers, unlocking the cell. Everyone's at the fire. "You have maybe 5 minutes?" Isaac steps out, flexing his legs after days of confinement. "Come with me," he offers. Henry shakes his head. "I can't. My family's here." His voice cracks. "Just make it count." Isaac grips the young man's shoulder. "I won't forget this." They part at the back door, Henry toward the commotion, Isaac into the shadows of the alley. The fog swallows him as he limps quickly away from town, keeping close to buildings, then fences, then finally open fields. Half an hour later, Isaac approaches his small shack. The door hangs broken on its hinges. Carter's men have searched it thoroughly, but they didn't find what matters. Isaac drops to his knees behind the shack, feeling along the ground until his fingers find the loose dirt near the foundation. He digs with his bare hands, ignoring the pain as his nails break against stones and roots. 6 inches down, his fingers touch oilcloth. He pulls the bundle free, unwrapping it just enough to confirm its contents. A long Whitworth rifle, its wooden stock worn smooth from use, its barrel still gleaming despite the years. "Never thought I'd hold you again," Isaac murmurs, rewrapping the weapon. A twig snaps nearby. Isaac freezes, ready to run, when a familiar voice calls softly, "Uncle Isaac?" Elijah emerges from the trees, followed by Silas Boone. Relief washes over the boy's face. "You made it," Elijah says, rushing forward to embrace his uncle. Boone hangs back, eyeing the bundle in Isaac's hands. "So it's true," he says. "You're really him." Isaac nods once. "I was. We need to move," Boone says urgently. "The Bureau has a safe house in Meridian. From there, we can get you north." Isaac shakes his head. "If I run, they'll burn this town to the ground after I'm gone. They'll kill every person who helped me." "You can't stay," Elijah argues. "The sheriff is a man, not a god," Isaac interrupts. "And men bleed." Boone studies Isaac's face, recognition dawning in his eyes. "You're not running," he says slowly. "You're planning to fight." "I'm planning justice," Isaac corrects. They continue their whispered debate as they make their way through the woods to an abandoned barn Boone's men have secured. Inside, lanterns cast long shadows against weathered walls. A crude map of Pine Hollow lies spread on a table, held down by rocks. "Carter has friends in the state government," Boone explains, pointing to the courthouse. "That's why my hands are tied. We need evidence of his corruption, documents, witnesses, before the Bureau can act. Henry might help," Elijah suggests. Isaac runs his finger across the map, his mind elsewhere. The sheriff keeps records of his bribes, his ledger. Martha said he brags about it. Their planning continues through the night. As dawn approaches, they agree that Henry will try to find the ledger, while Boone's men gather testimonies from other freedmen Carter has terrorized. None of them hear the commotion in town until it's too late. The morning breaks with a crowd gathering in the square. Isaac, returning from checking the perimeter, bursts into the barn. "Something's happening," he says urgently. They approach the edge of town cautiously, staying hidden among the trees. What they see freezes their blood. Sheriff Carter stands on a wagon beneath an oak tree, addressing the crowd. Beside him, hands bound and face bloody, kneels Henry Doyle. "This boy helped a murderer escape," Carter shouts. "This is what happens to traitors." Before anyone can move or speak, Carter kicks the young deputy off the wagon. The rope around Henry's neck goes taut. Elijah turns away, stomach heaving. Boone curses under his breath. Isaac watches, his face a mask of stone. They can't risk showing themselves, can't help as Henry's body swings slowly in the morning breeze. The crowd disperses gradually, some horrified, others nodding approval. Only when the square empties do they retreat to the barn. Isaac moves mechanically, his eyes dark with something beyond rage. "I should have made him come with us," he says finally, his voice hollow. "This isn't your fault," Boone insists. But Isaac isn't listening. He unwraps his rifle, laying it carefully across his lap. With deliberate movements, he begins to clean it, wiping each part with the tenderness of a father caring for a child. "Carter dies," he says simply, "before the next sunrise." Neither Boone nor Elijah argues. As afternoon fades to evening, Martha finds them. Her eyes are red from crying, her dress dusty from hurrying through back paths. "Henry," she says, her voice breaking. "We know," Boone answers gently. She looks at Isaac, at the rifle in his hands, and understanding passes between them. "Carter's telling everyone you'll come back," she says. "He's got men watching the roads, the fields. Says he'll burn down our settlement if anyone helps you." Isaac continues cleaning his rifle, his hands steady despite everything. The lantern light catches in his eyes as he works. "I once fought for the Union," he tells Martha softly. "Now I fight for peace." Martha shakes her head, a bitter smile touching her lips. "Peace don't live here no more," she says. "Not in Pine Hollow." Isaac lifts the rifle, chambers a bullet with a sound like a promise. "Then we'll have to invite it back." The lantern flickers, casting his face half in shadow, half in light, like a man standing between two worlds, or two versions of himself. The soldier he was, the avenger he must become. Dawn broke over Pine Hollow in streaks of orange and gold, promising a beautiful day that would soon turn ugly. Martha's small schoolhouse stood at the edge of the freedmen's settlement, a simple wooden structure that had become a symbol of hope. Children arrived with their slates and books, only to stop short, their faces reflecting the horror before them. The schoolhouse was engulfed in flames. Thick black smoke billowed into the morning sky as fire consumed the walls and roof. Books and papers scattered across the yard, some still burning, others trampled into the mud. The American flag that had hung proudly by the door lay in tatters, torn and discarded. A group of riders moved away from the scene, their laughter carrying on the morning air. Sheriff Carter led them, his badge catching the sunlight as he turned in his saddle to admire their handiwork. One of his deputies reached into a saddlebag, pulling out scraps of red, white, and blue cloth, remnants of the flag they had torn down. "Here's what I think of your new learning," he called out, tossing the pieces into the mud and riding his horse over them. The children stood frozen, some crying, others too shocked to make a sound. Parents who had heard the commotion arrived, pulling their children back from the flames that had devoured their dreams of education. From the cover of pine trees 100 yards away, Isaac and Boone watched in grim silence. They had come at first light to scout the town, hoping to locate where Carter kept his records. Instead, they witnessed this new cruelty. "He's escalating," Boone said quietly, his knuckles white around his field glasses. "Burning schools, hanging deputies. He's trying to provoke open conflict." Isaac's face remained stone-like, but his eyes burned with a cold fire. "Where's Elijah?" he asked, scanning the crowd for his nephew. Martha appeared among the gathered freedmen, trying to comfort the children. Her dress was covered in soot, her face streaked with tears of rage. But Elijah wasn't with her. "I don't see him," Boone admitted. "But we can't just walk in there. Carter's got men everywhere now." As they watched, Carter rode to the center of the gathering. "Let this be a lesson," he shouted. "Education's wasted on your kind, and if anyone's helping that murderer Harlan, their homes will be next." Isaac took a step forward, but Boone caught his arm. "Not now," he hissed. "That's exactly what he wants." The sheriff's eyes scanned the tree line, as if searching for them. "And tell Harlan if he wants to see his nephew alive again, he knows where to find me." Isaac froze. "He has Elijah." Boone cursed under his breath. "Must have taken him in the night." He turned to Isaac, his expression grave. "I need to ride for the bureau station at Meridian. With this," he gestured to the burning schoolhouse, "and Henry's murder, we might finally get official intervention." "How long?" Isaac asked, his voice tight. 2 days, maybe 3, to gather enough men." Isaac shook his head. "Elijah doesn't have 3 days. You can't go in there alone," Boone argued. "That's suicide." "Then I'll die as myself," Isaac said simply. "Not hiding in these woods." They separated at midday. Boone riding hard for Meridian, Isaac retreating deeper into the forest to prepare. He cleaned his rifle again, checking each part with mechanical precision. As the sun began to set, he made his way toward town, moving silently despite his limp. Night fell over Pine Hollow like a heavy blanket. Lanterns glowed in windows, and the streets emptied as most townsfolk retreated indoors. Carter had doubled the guards around the jail and courthouse, but even soldiers grow careless in familiar territory. From the shadow of an alley, Isaac watched 4 deputies gathered around a bottle outside the jailhouse door. Their voices carried in the quiet night. "Think he'll really show?" one asked, taking a swig. Another spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "Sheriff says he will. Says this eagle-eye fellow can't help himself." "You believe all that about him being some kind of ghost sniper?" "Don't matter what I believe," came the reply. "Sheriff's got the boy locked up tight in the courthouse cellar. Says his uncle will come for him sure as sunrise." Isaac faded back into the shadows, circling around to the courthouse. It stood dark except for a light in Carter's office on the 2nd floor. 2 guards patrolled the perimeter, but their pattern was predictable. 5 minutes at the front, 2 at each side. He waited until both were at the front before slipping to a back window. The lock gave way to his knife, and he eased inside, finding himself in a storeroom filled with dusty files and ledgers. Beyond the door, he heard voices, Carter and another man. "When he comes, I want him alive," Carter was saying. "I aim to hang him proper, make an example." "What about the boy?" the other voice asked. "Insurance. Once Harlan's caught, we'll see." Isaac moved silently through the dark corridor, following the sound of Carter's voice to his office. The door stood slightly ajar, yellow lamplight spilling out. Through the crack, he could see Carter sitting at his desk, a whiskey glass in one hand, talking to a nervous-looking townsman. The stairs to the cellar would be at the back. Isaac edged away from the office, staying low. He had almost reached the cellar door when a dog barked, once, twice, loud and sharp. Footsteps pounded above, and a door slammed open. "Someone's inside!" a voice shouted. Isaac lunged for the cellar door, but too late. A deputy appeared at the end of the hall, pistol drawn. "Got him!" he yelled, firing a wild shot that splintered the wood near Isaac's head. More men flooded in. Isaac fought, A whirlwind of precise violence, dropping 2 deputies before something hard struck the back of his skull. He fell to his knees, vision blurring, as more blows rained down. When his eyes cleared, he found himself chained to a heavy wooden chair in what appeared to be Carter's office. Blood ran warm down his temple. Across from him, Elijah sat similarly bound, his young face bruised, but his eyes defiant. "Uncle Isaac," he whispered. "You all right, boy?" Isaac asked, voice rough. Elijah nodded slightly. "I didn't tell them nothing." Sheriff Carter entered, flanked by his remaining deputies. He looked down at Isaac with smug satisfaction. "The famous eagle eye," he sneered. "Not so scary now, are you?" He kicked Isaac's chair, making it scrape across the floor. "You know, I lost 2 brothers to Union snipers. Wonder if it was you pulled the trigger." Isaac said nothing, his gaze steady. Carter leaned in close, his breath sour with whiskey. "You ain't scaring nobody with your soldier stories." A faint smile touched Isaac's bloodied lips. "You should be scared of what you made." The sheriff struck him across the face, then straightened his vest. "Chain them both in the cellar. Tomorrow, we hang them side by side." The deputies dragged Isaac and Elijah down the stairs and secured them to iron rings set in the stone wall. Hours passed in darkness. Isaac tested his chains methodically, finding no weakness in their moorings. Night deepened. Upstairs, the courthouse fell quiet except for the occasional footstep of guards. Isaac's head throbbed where they'd struck him. Blood had dried in stiff trails down his neck. Beside him, Elijah had fallen into an exhausted sleep. Slowly, almost unconsciously, Isaac began to hum, the same Union marching tune from his cell days before. The melody filled the dark cellar, growing stronger with each note. Upstairs, the deputies on night watch fell silent, listening. One crossed himself. "That's the song from Petersburg," he whispered. "My pa told me about it. Said Union boys hummed it before the sharpshooters came." Carter appeared in the doorway of his makeshift quarters, his face haggard in the lamplight. "Shut up," he snapped. "It's just a damn song." But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. He'd heard the stories, too, of the silent death that came after that tune, of officers falling with a single shot from nowhere. "Get out," he ordered his men suddenly. "All of you. I'll watch them myself." As the deputies filed out, casting nervous glances behind them, Carter poured himself another whiskey, larger than before. He drank it in one swallow. In the cellar below, Isaac continued to hum, the sound drifting up through the floorboards like a ghost's promise. Dawn broke cold and gray over Pine Hollow. The newly built gallows stood in the courthouse square like a dark promise, its fresh lumber pale against the morning sky. 2 nooses hung motionless in the windless air. The crowd gathered slowly, white townsfolk in front, their faces a mixture of grim satisfaction and uneasy doubt. Behind them, freedmen stood in silent clusters, forced to witness by Carter's deputies who patrolled with rifles ready. Children clutched their mothers' skirts, eyes wide with fear. Martha Green arrived under guard, her head held high despite the bruises on her face. The deputy shoved her toward the back with the other freedmen. Moments later, Silas Boone was marched in, his hands bound before him, blood crusted at his temple. He scanned the crowd desperately, as if searching for help that wasn't there. At precisely 7 o'clock, a drum began to beat. The courthouse doors swung open. Sheriff Carter emerged first, wearing his full uniform, brass buttons gleaming in the weak sunlight. Behind him came Isaac and Elijah, chains binding their ankles, wrists tied before them. Isaac's face remained calm despite the dried blood on his shirt. Beside him, Elijah walked with his uncle's same dignity, though his young eyes betrayed his fear. The crowd fell silent as Carter raised his hands. "Citizens of Pine Hollow," he announced, his voice carrying across the square. "Today, we witness justice. These men, He gestured toward Isaac and Elijah. "Are criminals against the peace. This one," he jabbed a finger toward Isaac, "murdered a Union veteran and corrupted his own kin with treasonous thoughts." A murmur passed through the crowd. Several freedmen shook their heads in silent protest. "This is no ordinary criminal," Carter continued, pacing before the gallows. "This man claims to have been a soldier of the old Union, a killer of our Southern brothers. Well, today the war truly ends." Boone stepped forward suddenly, breaking away from his guard. "This is illegal," he shouted. "I have orders from the Freedmen's Bureau." He fumbled in his coat with bound hands, producing folded papers. "This man deserves a proper trial." Carter strode to Boone, snatched the papers, and tore them in half. "Your bureau has no authority here." He punctuated his words with a hard punch that sent Boone sprawling in the dust. Martha tried to reach him, but a deputy held her back. "Proceed," Carter ordered his men. Two deputies pushed Isaac and Elijah up the gallows steps. The crowd pressed closer. Isaac's eyes found Martha's across the square, then swept over the buildings surrounding them. His gaze lingered on the church steeple in the distance, then the rooftops near the courthouse. The executioner, a heavy-set man with a flour sack over his head, placed the first noose around Elijah's neck. The boy trembled but didn't cry out. "Any last words, boy?" Carter called up. Elijah raised his chin. "I ain't afraid of you." Carter laughed. "You should be." He nodded to the executioner, who moved toward Isaac with the second noose. As he raised it toward Isaac's neck, a sharp crack split the air. The deputy standing beside Carter jerked backward, a red mist blooming where his forehead had been. He crumpled to the ground. For a moment, nobody moved, the sound still echoing across the square. "Sniper!" someone screamed. Another shot cracked out. A deputy on the roof of the general store toppled forward, tumbling into the crowd below. Panic erupted. People scattered in all directions, trampling each other in their haste to escape. "Hold your ground!" Carter bellowed to his men, drawing his pistol. "Find that shooter!" A third shot answered him, splintering the wood of the gallows just inches from Carter's head. The executioner fled down the steps. Deputies fired wildly at the surrounding buildings, seeing ghosts in every window. On the gallows platform, Isaac reacted with lightning speed. He drove his shoulder into the nearest guard, sending the man tumbling down the steps. With his bound hands, he yanked the noose from Elijah's neck. "Run!" he ordered. Below, Martha had reached Boone in the confusion. She helped him to his feet as freedmen scattered into alleyways and behind buildings. Another shot rang out. Another deputy fell. Carter was screaming orders, but his men were breaking rank, diving for cover wherever they could find it. Isaac and Elijah leapt from the platform, landing hard on the packed earth. Isaac's bad leg buckled, but Elijah caught him before he could fall. Together they sprinted toward the courthouse, bullets kicking up dust at their heels. They burst through the side door, slamming it shut behind them. Inside, the courthouse stood empty, everyone having rushed out to witness the hanging. Elijah helped Isaac into a small office off the main corridor. "Who's shooting?" Elijah whispered, his voice trembling with adrenaline. Isaac shook his head. "Friends," he said simply, working at the ropes around his wrists with his teeth. When they finally came loose, he quickly freed Elijah's hands. Outside, gunfire continued. Single, precise shots followed by cries of pain. "How many friends?" Elijah asked. "Just one," Isaac answered. "Boone must have brought him." They moved to the window. The square had mostly cleared. Bodies of deputies lay scattered where they had fallen. Surviving lawmen crouched behind water troughs and wagon wheels, firing blindly at rooftops. In the center of it all stood Sheriff Carter, his face purple with rage as his authority dissolved into chaos. Isaac turned to Elijah, his expression hardening. "There's only one man left I came here for." Inside the courthouse, dust motes danced in shafts of morning light that cut through the dim interior. The air hung heavy with the smell of gunpowder that seeped through broken windows. The grand building, once a symbol of order, now echoed with distant gunfire and panicked shouts from outside. Sheriff Beauregard Carter stumbled backward down the corridor, his polished boots leaving scuff marks on the wooden floor. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he fumbled with the keys to his office. His hands, usually steady when holding a gun to a man's head, now trembled visibly. He glanced over his shoulder, seeing nothing but shadows and ghosts. "Cowards!" he shouted to his absent men. "Stand your ground!" But no one answered. He was alone. Carter finally unlocked his office door and barricaded himself inside, pushing a heavy oak desk against the entrance. He drew the curtains closed, plunging the room into darkness, save for a single candle he lit with shaking fingers. His revolver felt slippery in his palm as he pointed it toward the door. Waiting, the courthouse grew quieter outside. The gunfire slowed, then stopped altogether. Carter's breathing sounded thunderous in the silence. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Soft, measured footsteps approached, unhurried, deliberate. "Who's there?" Carter called out, his voice cracking. "I'm armed!" No answer came. The footsteps stopped outside his door. Carter fired through the wood, the shot deafening in the small room. Splinters flew as the bullet tore through, embedding somewhere in the corridor wall. Silence followed. 10 seconds. 20. Then, without warning, the door pushed open. The heavy desk slid across the floor as if pushed by a giant hand. Carter fired again, wildly this time. The bullet shattered a window behind where a man should have been standing. But Isaac Harlan wasn't there. He was already inside, having slipped through the window while Carter focused on the door. "You missed," Isaac said softly from behind him. Carter spun around, finger tightening on the trigger. Before he could squeeze it, a single shot rang out. The revolver flew from Carter's hand, taking 2 of his fingers with it. Blood splattered across the office wall. Carter screamed, clutching his mangled hand. "You shot me!" "I shot your gun," Isaac corrected, his voice calm. "If I wanted to kill you, you'd already be dead." Isaac stood tall despite his limp, the Whitworth rifle steady in his hands. He wore no uniform now, just the simple clothes of a farmer. But his eyes held the cold precision of a soldier who had seen 100 battles. "Sit down," Isaac ordered, gesturing to the sheriff's chair with the rifle barrel. Carter, cradling his bleeding hand, obeyed, his face contorted between pain, fear, and hatred. "My men will kill you," he spat. "Your men are running or dead," Isaac replied. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded, singed paper. He tossed it onto the desk. "From Martha's schoolhouse, the one you burned." Carter glanced down. Even charred at the edges, the document was recognizable. The Emancipation Proclamation, printed in bold type. "Read it," Isaac commanded. Carter looked up, defiance flaring. "Never." He spat on the paper. "That don't mean nothing here. This is my town." Without changing expression, Isaac aimed slightly to the right of Carter's head and pulled the trigger. The bullet sliced through the flame of the candle on the desk, splitting it perfectly in 2 before embedding in the wall. The flame wavered but continued burning, now divided into twin points of light. Carter flinched violently, a wet stain spreading across his trousers. "Read," Isaac repeated, the rifle already reloaded. With trembling fingers, Carter unfolded the document. His voice shook as he began to read. "By the President of the United States of America, a proclamation." He paused, looking up at Isaac with hatred. "All of it," Isaac said. Carter continued, each word forced through gritted teeth. "That all persons held as slaves within said designated states and parts of states are, and henceforward shall be, free." As Carter read, Isaac's expression remained unchanged, but something shifted in his eyes. A weight lifting, a promise kept. Outside, the gunfire had completely stopped. Sunlight broke through the curtains, illuminating dust and smoke in the air. Carter's voice grew hoarse as he finished the document, the last words barely audible. And upon this act, sincerely believed to be an act of justice, warranted by the Constitution, upon military necessity, I invoke the considerate judgment of mankind and the gracious favor of Almighty God. He dropped the paper, his breathing ragged. Happy now, boy? It's just words. Always was. Isaac lowered his rifle slightly. Now you understand the law. He took a step back. The Freedmen's Bureau is coming. They'll want to know what happened to Thomas Ward, and Henry Doyle, and all the others. A cruel smile twisted Carter's bloody lips. They won't believe a dead man. In a flash, Carter yanked open his desk drawer and lunged for a hidden revolver. But before he could raise it, a shot thundered from the doorway. Carter jerked backward, a perfect hole appearing through his sheriff's badge. Blood blossomed across his chest as he slumped forward onto the desk, the unfired revolver clattering to the floor. In the doorway stood Elijah, Martha's old schoolhouse pistol steady in his young hands. Smoke curled from its barrel. His eyes were wide, but dry. Isaac moved quickly to his nephew's side, gently taking the gun from the boy's hands. Elijah let it go, his fingers trembling now that the deed was done. He was going to kill you, Elijah whispered. I know. Isaac knelt beside him, supporting the boy's shoulders as the adrenaline drained from his small frame. Outside, voices approached, Boone and others, calling Isaac's name. Isaac looked down at the sheriff's body, then back to his nephew. He placed his weathered hand on Elijah's shoulder, steadying him. The war's over now, boy, he said softly. But his eyes told a different truth, that wars never truly end. They just change shape. That peace must be guarded by those willing to remember what violence cost them. A week later, Pine Hollow looked different. The morning air carried the scent of sawdust and fresh paint instead of gunpowder and fear. Union investigators in blue uniforms moved through the streets, writing in notebooks and questioning townspeople. They looked out of place among the weathered buildings, like birds of bright plumage in a faded landscape. Silas Boone directed the investigation from the courthouse steps. His ordinarily stooped shoulders stood straighter now, his bureau badge catching sunlight as he pointed officials toward evidence. The courthouse doors remained open, unlike during Carter's reign when they'd been barred to anyone with dark skin. Found another ledger, called a young agent, emerging from the sheriff's office with a leather-bound book. Names of freedmen he collected taxes from. Triple what white folks paid. Boone nodded grimly. Add it to the pile. We're building a case that'll reach all the way to Washington. Inside the sheriff's office, men in spectacles carefully sorted through papers pulled from hidden compartments and false drawer bottoms. They laid out documents in neat rows, lists of lynchings disguised as suicides, deeds stolen from freedmen, and letters to former Confederate officers discussing containment of the slave problem. It's all here, Boone muttered to a senior investigator beside him. 6 years of terror hidden behind a badge. The investigator, a gray-haired man with a permanent frown, shook his head. And how many other towns just like this one? Boone had no answer. Across town, where the charred remains of Martha's schoolhouse had stood, a new cabin rose. It wasn't grand, just rough-cut pine boards and a tin roof. But the door stood wide open, and children's voices spilled from inside. Martha Green stood before a makeshift blackboard, pointing to words written in careful chalk. Freedom, she read. Justice. Constitution. 20 children repeated after her, their voices a chorus of hope in a place that had known too little of it. In the back of the room, 3 white children sat beside black ones. Their parents stood nervously at the windows, but they didn't pull them away. Today we learn about what happened here, Martha said, turning to a map of the United States pinned to the wall. Red lines marked battle sites of the Civil War, and why it matters that we remember. She gestured to a simple wooden cabinet in the corner. Inside, protected by glass, lay Isaac's tarnished medal and his Whitworth rifle, laid down horizontally like a soldier finally at rest. These belonged to a man who fought for freedom twice, Martha told the children. Once with an army behind him, and once standing alone. A mile away, Isaac knelt before a fresh grave. Unlike the grand markers in the white cemetery, this one was simple, a wooden cross in the clearing where the freedmen buried their dead. Isaac had carved the words himself. Henry Doyle, for the living who tried. Elijah sat cross-legged beside his uncle, a book open on his lap. His finger traced each word as he read aloud from a primer Martha had given him. "The brave man is not he who feels no fear," Elijah read carefully, "but he who conquers that fear." Isaac nodded. "Good. Keep going." Elijah continued reading, while Isaac arranged wildflowers at the base of the cross. The boy's reading had improved dramatically in just 1 week, as if something had cleared in his mind, making room for learning instead of survival. "Uncle Isaac," Elijah said, looking up from his book, "are we safe now?" Isaac considered this for a long moment. "Safer," he finally answered, "and that's enough to start with." As the sun began its westward descent, Martha approached them along the footpath. Her dress was simple but clean, her posture straight, despite everything the past years had cost her. "The children are asking when you'll come tell them about the war," she said to Isaac. Isaac shook his head. "Some stories aren't for children. Some truths are for everyone," Martha countered gently. "Especially the hard ones." She sat beside them on a fallen log, smoothing her skirts. "Boone told me to speak with you. The Bureau wants to hire you. As a scout and guide for their protection units, they need men who know this land, who understand both sides." Isaac looked at the grave before them. "I've seen enough killing to last generations." "It wouldn't be about killing," Martha said. "It would be about preventing it." Isaac's weathered face remained unreadable. "My war is over." Martha didn't press further. She understood that some men couldn't walk back into the shadows once they'd found the light. From down the path, Boone approached. His limp matched Isaac's, step for halting step. He didn't speak when he reached them, merely raised his hand in a formal salute, one soldier acknowledging another across the divide of race that had separated them too long. Isaac returned the gesture, his hand remembering the motion even after all these years. "Thank you," Boone said simply, "for reminding us all what that badge was supposed to mean." As afternoon faded into evening, Isaac and Elijah walked along the riverbank. The Mississippi flowed golden in the sunset light, carrying yesterday downstream and bringing tomorrow from places they couldn't see. Isaac's limp was pronounced after the long day, but he refused Elijah's offered arm. Some burdens a man carried alone, out of habit, if nothing else. At the water's edge, Isaac stopped. Cicadas hummed in the trees behind them. Fish jumped in the current, leaving ripples that expanded and disappeared. "What happens now?" Elijah asked. "Now we plant," Isaac replied. "We build. We read." Isaac gazed across the golden water to the far shore, where the trees stood tall and unburned. The shadows were long, but no longer seemed to hide threats behind every trunk. "Now I can finally stop aiming," Isaac whispered, as if confessing a secret to the river itself. The words hung in the air, simple and profound. For a man who had spent years looking through a rifle sight, at enemies, at threats, at a future that might kill him if he didn't kill it first, the permission to lower his guard was both gift and challenge. Elijah didn't fully understand, but he nodded anyway. He'd seen enough to know that peace was as complicated as war, just quieter. The Mississippi rolled on beneath the darkening sky, indifferent to the tiny figures on its bank. A man who had fought too long and a boy who wouldn't have to. I hope you found that story powerful. Leave a like on the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. I have handpicked 2 stories for you that are even more powerful. Have a great day.